Hey everybody, Digital Sticks here, and today I want to talk to you about the original CV1 and is it a good headset in 2020? Well, to start with, I've described myself as a VR enthusiast. It's probably more accurate to say I'm a VR chat enthusiast because VR chat's what's made me enthusiastic about VR, and really VR chat is kind of the basis for where I determine where I compare headsets. But it's because VR chat is a game. It's basically virtual reality. It's a social virtual reality app. It's referred to as a game, and you can play games in it. But the reality is, people come here to socialize in the same context they would in reality, except for they're doing it in VR. And so it's actually giving people who have downsides socially, or for whatever reason, whether it's timing, uh, anxiety, or a disability, for whatever limits somebody socially in real life, um, it actually doesn't apply here. And so this is really just a quality, fully encompassing social life that's available to people who, for some reason, can't get it in real life. And even if you have a good social life in real life, of course, you can still come and enjoy this one too. But that makes it very unique. It's actually, even though there's a desktop version of the game, this game only exists because of VR, and it's VR that's made it amazing. It's VR that's inspired everything that it brings to the table. And basically, the desktop version is to essentially show the game, expand the user base, and give people in VR more people to interact with. It's just not a game that would have anywhere near its appeal if everybody was limited to desktop. Um, so the CV1 and the original Vive were the two headsets out when this game launched. So this game has not transformed dramatically since then. It has been updated. It does have enhancements. People are creating much more impressive content. Unity keeps getting better. So, there are things improving, but nothing has limited the ability of somebody using a CV1 to enjoy this game. If you have a CV1, your main concern with how well you would enjoy VR chat at that point is going to be down to your PC, not your headset. Now, again, like I said, it is, or maybe I haven't said this yet, but it is behind visually. That's really the only thing that the CV1 lags behind on as far as using it goes. So in VR chat, that's not that big of a downside. It's very it's just not like the it's obviously it doesn't hurt to have better visuals, but it really doesn't hurt to have just original Vive or original Rift visuals in VR chat. So as far as the quality experience, because it's comfortable, because it has quality audio built in, and because it's a PC headset that it's not relying on compression, it's not relying on anything convoluted, it's just directly driven from a PC, and it has touch controllers and excellent tracking once you get it set up. It's just a top-notch setup compared to a lot of other options for VR chat. So it is still that in 2020. Now, also, the hybrid setup that gets brought up quite a bit when talking about other headsets, well, it basically exists originally to allow trackers to be used with the CV1. And so at the time that the hybrid setup came about, at the time, the idea was that if you wanted full body tracking, you had to have a Vive, and then the Vive had the wands instead of the quality controllers that the CV1 has. And so people that already had a CV1 wanted trackers. It made more sense to get base stations and trackers than switch to a Vive. Some people just didn't want to switch to a Vive, myself included. And then, of course, a Vive isn't free. So, if you just, for all things, there's a lot of reasons, but ultimately, in my opinion at the time, the best full body option for VR chat was the hybrid setup, because you had the advantage of the touch controllers, which I'm using index controllers here, but the gesturing that I do with index controllers, the basic gestures are still intuitive and work that way with the Oculus Touch. You don't have full finger tracking, but you do have enough to, you can grip, you can point, and then VRChat has other gestures you can form, but your peace sign is what you'd expect it to be, your finger pointing is what you'd expect it to be, your fist is what you expect it to be, your open hands are what you'd expect them to be. And so that is also very intuitive for VR chat. That's great. With the touch controllers, the index controllers, extra fidelity is nice to have, but it's not anywhere near as essential as it's going to feel like to somebody with a Reverb G2 that has no touch capacity whatsoever. They're going to wish they had fingers. But on the Oculus side, the extra finger tracking from an index controller it's not a downside, but it's not a compelling selling point. Now, for people using the original ones, that was another story. The index controllers were a must-have. They were fortunate they could simply go out and buy them and use them with their Vive. So, it's a very good headset. So in 2020, it's just as good as it was when new, as long as it's fully functioning. The Achilles heel of the CV1 is apparently the cable. And that's actually not uncommon for headsets. Well, you can't buy a replacement cable, so if your cable goes bad, you're kind of out of luck. You could probably find some ways to patch it up or whatever, but nobody really seems to consistently get around to doing that. So that's where the quality of the used headset you're buying and how it's been used is going to come into play. So if it's a complete stranger and the headset looks super dirty, you might pass on it. But if you know it's somebody that upgraded a long time ago to something else and this CV1's been sitting in a box all that time, a lot of people got into the CV1 at the tail end of its run, and they immediately jumped ship to a new upgrade option. So I know mine, I had about a year on it, pretty hardcore, and then from there it's been in a box because I upgraded to the index. And now as far as how it feels in 2020, I had to use the Rift as part of vision treatment I was getting, and so I would occasionally put the Rift back on for the vision treatment, even though I was no longer using it at home. And my impression, honestly, was like, hello, old friend. Like, it felt kind of good. It was a familiar feeling. It was a good experience, and it was kind of fun to use again. It was, by comparison, I didn't use the Vive regularly. I have one now. I've had to use it temporarily, and it doesn't feel the same. It's still usable, and a lot of people that have Vives are still using their Vives with index controllers in VR chat. But the Rift for me versus the Vive as a headset is much nicer. It feels better. It's comfortable. Like I said, it's a pleasant moment to put one back on, versus like the Vive, it's kind of warm up to it and adjust and deal with it. Like when I had to do an RMA, so I temporarily used the Vive headset, and I adjusted. I mean, I still enjoyed VR chat with it as well, but the CV1 just is a pretty great headset out of the box. Now the downside is you do have to set it up. You got to have a USB port for every camera that you use. You will want at least 3 to have 360-degree tracking, which means for one, you'll probably be dealing with an extension cable of some sort. 2 of those cameras have to be on USB 3.0 ports. One of them actually has to be only on a 2.0 USB port. So the power tip there is make sure you get wall mounts if at all possible, because you don't want to have to repeat that process just because you bump a camera. But if you have wall mounts and things are up and you're not touching the cameras, once you get that set up, it's going to be a very reliable play space. And that reliable play space that's always ready to go is going to be nicer than an easier to set up but frequently have to be recalibrated play space. So it's good there. And if you have a CV1, if you can get one as a budget headset and you're using it, it's a great introductory headset to VR. You're behind the curve on visuals a little bit, But from there, it's an excellent candidate to use with the hybrid setup, and that can also be your stepping stone towards a Valve Index if you want it, or whatever else comes along that you want to use with that hybrid setup. A lot of people are liking the Reverb G2. It's got controller scheme issues. Well, if you're using that hybrid setup, you have an option. If you already have your base stations, you already have your trackers, the next thing you can add is a couple dongles and the index controllers if you want to go the reverb route, and you can do the hybrid setup there if you really want to. CV1 in 2020, it's fine. It really is fine. So if you find one at a good deal, like I would recommend that anybody. I think stock is becoming less of an issue for the headsets that are in demand right now. But if it comes back, if it's a matter of you don't know when you'd ever get one, or you can pay a scalping price for a headset, for as long as I've been watching VR, there's never been a headset that's being scalped that's worth what it costs being scalped, because the CV1 and the Vive kits themselves are already great enough that you can usually get those cheaper than the scalping markup on another headset. So if you're desperate enough for VR that you're going to pay that extra price, getting a cheap but working used headset is a much better deal than overpaying for that. There's people paying up to upwards of $1,000 for an original Quest just months ago. And then this Quest 2 was dropped. And, imagine how they feel now. If they would have come across my advice during that time, they would have known that if they picked up a CV1, they'd be in much better shape, and they would be happy for that advice today. So have I covered everything? I think that pretty much does. Okay, now as far as other VR goes, the original Vive, original CV1, not the best headsets for racing sims and stuff because of their resolution limitations, but that is the first headsets that people started racing and simulations on. So you can certainly adjust to it. It was the only option, and people were still wowed by VR for racing sims. People were using the original Rift and not wanting to go back to desktop racing because of the experience in VR. So there's that. Beat Saber, the resolution is a non-issue completely in Beat Saber. The extra tracking, in fact, some of the grip options for the original touch controllers are advantages. The other thing is, I've done a few retakes of this. If I haven't mentioned it here, now if you're new to the Oculus ecosystem, now I think if you purchase any new to you Oculus device, even if you already have an account, you have to set up the Facebook account to use it. So that's a downside, and that's certainly something for anyone wondering about the CV1 as a long-term headset. I think that's a downside to have it linked to Facebook. But it's not a deal breaker entirely, especially if you're buying used hardware and you're just getting into VR and you're just wanting to get in and you'll worry about upgrading later. Well, buy your games from Steam VR. Do not buy anything from the Oculus Store that's available on Steam. There is no reason to. Okay, you have to launch. You'll have to have Oculus open if you have an Oculus device, but then you can launch Steam VR. You can have Oculus minimized or whatever. It's not using a game-killing amount of resources either. It's not in the world, but then you can launch your game in Steam VR. Well, that Steam VR game, if your Facebook account gets banned or if for some reason you decide to delete it, you'll still own that Steam VR game. Anything you own from Oculus is gone. And also, when you want something other than an Oculus headset as your next VR device, your games will go with you if you're already using them on Steam, because odds are any device you get is going to work with Steam, and good chance that you're upgrading to something that works directly with Steam. So you're getting the best of all worlds where there's no extra software to run, hardware's all native, and you own your games in the same platform. Strongly recommend Steam VR for the place to buy your games, and you can use Steam VR with the original Rift just fine. So that's it. There's really no reason to stress out over a CV1. If you're wanting VR, you've been wanting VR for a while, and you're seeing one for $150 or something that you can count on, it's going to work. It's worth it. That is absolutely worth it. Top end price, it's hard to say. If you're wanting for VR chat, my personal preference, I would prefer the original Rift. I know over the original Quest, quite sure over the Quest 2 as well, and but that's getting down to personal preference, I think, more than anything else. So I don't recommend the Rift CV1 over anything clearly or definitely, but it's nothing to sweat. If you've got a good deal in one, it's not something to ignore if you've found a good deal in one. And if you were to get one, even in 2020, it should be a good enough headset that you can take your time from there to get the upgrade that you want. Like if you have a CV1 today and you're wanting a quality headset, if you've paid any attention to any of my other videos or seen other reviews, you should kind of get a good idea that the Quest line has significant compromises. And some of those compromises are shared just by just being a Facebook product, but it also has, compromises in comfort, audio, things of that nature. The most complete package right now, and VR Chat takes advantage of it, not every game requires it, the most complete package is the Index kit. That's their most complete new out-of-the-box kit. That is just a simple fact. There's other give and take for other headsets. There is a visual quality to the Reverb G2 that some people like better than the Index, but then they have to give up the Index's extra field of view, which is really nice. So there's trade-offs back and forth, and when it's all said and done, if you currently have a CV1 and you're on a budget, you can aim high as your next step. There is no rush to move on to another headset of any kind until you actually are getting the headset that you want at that point. So it's going to last for a while. And if your PC is struggling, if it barely meets VR specs and things of that sort, and you're not going to be able to take full advantage of visuals for a higher end headset, it might make more sense to just get started with something like a CV1 and then see how everything pans out for you as far as upgrades or whatever. Because if you're really far behind, you're probably at this point, if you're at the bottom end of VR, on your specs, you're most likely using a system that cannot be fully upgraded to what you'd want to upgrade it to. Like, if you're at the bottom end of VR specs now, you're probably at a point where your next upgrade strongly needs to be considered, or for your next upgrade, a new PC needs to be considered. And if you're in that position and you don't know where that money is coming from, the CV1 just might make the most sense, because then you can see what else is out there. By the time you build the PC, could there be something better than an Index? Is there an Index 2? Is there something else? That's, the name escapes me. There's another headset being teased that a lot of people are putting down because it sounds too good to be true, especially for the price it's being proposed at. I don't know why the name's skipping my mind at the moment, but really though, if that comes to fruition, for a lot of people, that will be better than an Index, especially for the money. So, with all things considered, CV1 in 2020 is not a go-to headset, but it's not a run-from headset either. It is a quality headset even still. A lot of people that have moved on from it couldn't go back to one very happily, but as your introduction to VR, it's a good headset. That's what I started with. I used it for a year, and I didn't want to even upgrade when I did. As far as experience, I didn't feel like I was missing anything that I needed to upgrade. What did win me over was somebody else that had upgraded to the Index that also used the hybrid setup like I was using, and they spoke about their resources being better used and the lack of a hassle and anything. They helped persuade me to get off the fence and decide I wanted an Index kit myself. I'm glad they did. I haven't regretted it, but I just have to say, before being aware of reasons to want something different, just the mere spec comparisons and before being aware of reasons to upgrade, there was nothing on the CV1 experience that had me wanting an upgrade. I expected to be using that for quite some time. And so I still own it. I just don't have a use for it at the moment. So anyways, thank you for watching this, and I hope it helped. There's probably not a lot of people still considering that, but if you are, hopefully this helps you. I don't really have a summary other than it is a good headset. It's as good of a headset as it ever was, as long as it's in good working condition and hasn't been used too hard. If the cable's near its end of life, if it's really been put through some ringers, then it may not last you long. But if it's been cared for or lightly used, and a lot of them out there have, there's no reason to hesitate to get one. If whatever reason you're considering one, it's probably going to be a good enough reason to buy it. You're aware of what's out there new, and with your budget in mind and the different features, you're considering a CV1. You can't go wrong at that point. So thank you for watching, and have a good day.